Okay YouTube, Warbles on a lot here with part 2 of my 2013 Anzac Day special. Part 1 was a book review of Active Service. Part 2 is a book review of Khaki and Green. With the Australian Army at home and overseas. This is a 1943 edition, which I paid $10 for. And it covers Palestine, United Kingdom, Egypt, Libya, Greece, Crete, Eritrea, Cyprus, Syria, Siam, Malaya, Java, Ambon, Ceylon, China, New Britain, Oceania, Nauru, New Caledonia, New Guinea, Solomons, Papua, Timor and Dutch New Guinea. Because the second AIF kind of got around a bit. Editorial note, because alcohol goes so very well with war stories, this is a malt liquor video. 6.3%. And that's the fifth one I've had today. Okay, so although the first part of this book does deal with fighting in the desert in the Middle East, jungle warfare was the big thing in 1943, which is when this was published. To the memory of fallen comrades, with a foreword of the general who sent them into battle. Christmas shopping in El Alamein in 1941. Caption reads, "Booby trap, do you reckon?" Instead of talking about the people who were taken prisoner by the Germans in Greece, we have a painting of the thousands who came back from the Allied defeat in Greece. Now the Germans had got involved. It was a bit different from fighting the Italians. I recall reading this story, and this bloke sat there in a shell hole in no man's land all night under the 1908 Parabellum Luger held by the German, and the Australian didn't realise that there was no bullets in the gun. And finally, eventually, he worked up the courage to jump up and stab the other fella to death with a bayonet. And it wasn't until the next morning that he realised that he'd killed an unarmed man. "We've got 'em on the run, the Nazi bastards," he paused and grinned at Tiny. "Reckon you won your private battle too." Private battle, Tiny thought. The Australian's voice went on. "Plucky man to jump his gun. Bet you didn't know it wasn't loaded." And all the stories are written by people who've listed only their service identification number rather than their name. Which, at the time, I thought was a pretty fair ring of authenticity. Although, with 2020 hindsight, it could have been contrived, but I don't think it was. As in the previous volume, lots of cartoons. Bit of a joke about the malaria. Honest, I never saw the lights. And lots of post-imperial, neo-colonial, domino-type, ethnocentric racism. And I was warning you against these wogs. Once again, he succumbed to gastroenteritis. Or perhaps malaria. But, you know, wog was an Australian term for a wealthy Oriental gentleman. Or a worthy Oriental gentleman at the time. And once again, Commander-in-Chief Australian Military Forces, General Sir Thomas A. Blamey, GBE KCB CMG DSO. Whinstone Church Kill gets a bit of an appearance with ancient Photoshop by scissors, montaged onto a bunch of signposts, and an Australian digger writing a letter. Smiling Australian soldiers, lining up to be well treated at a first aid post, keen to go out and attack. With the odd bit of gallows humour, caption says, "You'll nearly get a B class out of this, Herb." No, I haven't a match. And don't call me mate. Got a match, Sergeant? Nope. Sorry, Corporal. Give us a light dig. Certainly, old chap. No, I haven't a match. And don't call me mate. As ye sow, so shall ye reap, little English warrant officer drill instructor. Being Anzac Day, as it is, you'd think that this is a picture of Simpson and his donkey at Gallipoli, isn't it? But no. This is the World War II parallel tracking Middle Eastern analogue. And of course it's got a sad ending. His head was hanging and maybe he was crying. I didn't feel so good myself. And strangely, the German enemy was humanised. To my enemy, I cannot see you through the blinding sand. I can only hear your bullets whine and sing. The day is ending and the night will bring us closer together here in this strange land. Each trained to kill, and in each nervous hand, strong tools of death with striker, fuse and spring. If we should meet tonight, the steel will ring, and we may die before we understand. But at the end, when all our debts are paid, should we live on, being too strong to die, when men grow weary of a lost crusade and leave their lifeless cities to the sky, there may then be some peace where you and I can meet again, unarmed and unafraid. Which is a kind of a different way of looking at a German tank attack in El Alamein, isn't it? Then we get what purports to be a blow-by-blow description of the battle, together with more battle maps. And I'm pretty sure that this is the same artist in the previous book, only now, a couple of years down the track, his work is being attributed to a serial number rather than, what was it, Ivor Healy? And some of the second AIF began to come back to Australia, while others fought on in the Middle East. And some of them didn't come home at all. Once again, a serial number did the drawing of the Australian with an Italian machine gun. Opposite, I saw a Panzer attack. And then we get a Lewis guns, anti-aircraft gunners in Darwin. Followed by the second AIF return. By 1943, you can see the Thompson submachine gun has a box magazine instead of a drum magazine, so it doesn't make noises to give away a patrol's position at night. We have a touch of the mundane with soldiers washing their underpants, because failure to do so results in being bare-assed and naked in the quartermaster's store. We have the sort of grateful hysteria with which the AIF was received when they returned to Australia, because nobody told the Australian people that the American naval code breakers had cracked the Japanese naval code, and the Allies were fully aware that the Japanese had no intentions of ever invading Australia. They were prepared to bomb it, yeah, but they didn't want to invade it. So what these fellas were actually training to do was conduct amphibious operations to push the Japanese back to Japan. Now here we're going to have a little bit of an actual book reading. I used to love this when I was a kid. Aircraft identification. Broadly speaking, there are two types of aircraft, ours and theirs. In theory, these are again divided into various types. Fighter, fighter bomber, dive bomber, torpedo bomber, light bomber, attack bomber, medium bomber, heavy bomber and reconnaissance plane. In practice, they are known as hostile aircraft. In fact, some of them are very hostile. You can have no idea just how hostile aircraft can be until you come to our area. I shall deal briefly with the problems of aircraft identification. From experiences during air raids, the following points are observed. Aircraft which strafe or bomb your position should be regarded with suspicion, if not deep mistrust. Aircraft which bomb and strafe your positions and wear a red circle should certainly be regarded with deep mistrust. In fact, the deeper the better. A 6 foot deep slit trench is an ideal place from which to mistrust them. A good idea is to empty a few mags at the intruder. A belly full of lead often acts as a gentle hint that the fellow is intruding. Unless he's an absolute cat and bounder, no further hint is necessary. The zero. Newcomers may find difficulty in distinguishing the zero from the, quote, wirra. An easy method is as follows. Zeros fly in formations of 12 upwards. Wirraways fly singly. This is to demonstrate our air superiority. You have only to read articles written by war correspondents serving in Melbourne to learn that Tojo's Air Force is negligible. These war correspondents agree that the Nip dive bomber has a very poor performance. That is so. In order to hit targets in our area, it bombs from 300 feet. Official instructions in regard to the Nips are to ignore them. As the Nips do not appear to be affected by such snubs, some difficulty may be experienced in ignoring them. However, this attitude is to be emulated as far as possible, although it is generally conceded that it is easier to ignore them from a distance than it is here. High-level bombing. Here is the lowdown on high-level bombing. Usually in these circumstances, Nip pattern bombs. This means that he drops bombs all around the target just to show what he could do if he had air superiority. A good way to identify hostile high-level bombers is to observe if our ACAC is firing on them. Unless it is a practice shoot, one may reasonably assume that said high-level bombers are hostile. Bombs. In theory, Nip bombs fall into several classifications: incendiary, high explosive, anti-personnel, and odds and sods. Their size varies from small to big. In practice, all hostile bombs are very big. They fall into two classes: direct hits and near misses. Direct hits are to be avoided if possible. If a direct hit is avoided, it becomes a near miss. It should be remembered that all bombs are hostile. It is reliably reported that all Nipponese bomb aimers are cross-eyed, thereby accounting for the large numbers of near misses which are scored. It is expected that, in time, owing to the increasing shortage of cross-eyed Nipponese bomb aimers, direct hits will be scored. At present, it is not known what steps will be taken by Imperial Nipponese headquarters to avoid this. Bomb damage. Study of bomb damage made to the inexperienced seems simple enough. Not so. After raids, it is often impossible to see any damage caused by the raiders. Not until one listens to Radio Tokyo does one learn of the smashing raids, the huge casualties, the terrible damage. And the Nip works very silently. One day, when he wrecked the railway line and blew up a troop train, not a single raider was seen or heard. Not until we heard Tokyo radio did we learn of this disaster. Newcomers to, quote, somewhere in Australia, unquote, will see no sign of a railway line or troop trains. Presumably, Nip has obliterated all trace of them, and the day months ago when the bulk of the garrison was smashed seemed singularly quiet. No trace of the unfortunate 30,000 killed was ever seen. It disheartened us considerably. In conclusion, the following points of interest are made on, quote, after the raid, unquote. Contact bombs are those which explode on contact, or a fraction of a second later. Besides these, there are delayed action and duds. A, quote, delayed action bomb, unquote, is one which lands near you and does explode. A, quote, dud, unquote, is one which lands elsewhere and does not go off. This brings us to the question of bomb disposal. The safest method is to remove yourself as quickly as possible from proximity with the bomb and summon the bomb disposal squad. This method is practically foolproof as far as you are concerned. If, however, there is no bomb disposal squad available and bomb disposal squads have a habit of disappearing, you must deal with the bomb yourself. In this case, fix the position of the bomb as accurately as possible from a distance of 200 yards and then go away for a couple of months. Upon your return, if the bomb is still there, pack a couple of sandbags upon it, plant a red flag and go on your way, rejoicing. By VX 116124. When I was a kid, I bloody loved that. I thought it was great. Not a bad cartoon, this one either. It's called a Command Performance. A weighted pack on a recalcitrant retreat with a warrant officer drill sergeant supervising. Quartermaster's store. What do you mean, where's your shorts? You've got them on. The Australian designed and manufactured Owen gun. You could dip it in a bucket of mud and it would come up still firing. What's a soldier thinking about? When he gets a bit war weary. There's incidents in Darwin. And the place looks a little bit worse for wear. Absolutely crackerjack pencil and charcoal illustrations. The obligatory cutesy poo soldier's pet collection. The recreation photos, as well as the training for war photos, and new ways for the baker to deliver the bread to troops in the field in New Guinea. And at the time, all of them thought the Japanese were seriously planning to invade Australia. That's what their government was telling them, to keep them interested in the war effort. And because gas had been used in the First World War, the Australian Army made absolutely no secret of the fact that they were practicing to use gas on the Japanese. They had an entire training camp dedicated to the purpose in North Queensland. I remember reading this as a kid and not knowing where the hell Timor was. And of course we have paintings of the Fuzzy Wuzzy Angels, as well as the battle maps. And this particular copy has colour battle maps from 1944 and 45, which I never had when I was a kid. I would have been fascinated if I'd had this much detail to wallow in, instead of simple black and white. And even black and white lapsed into confusing colour, because as a kid I didn't understand female impersonators, but it seems there were poofters in the army, mixed in with the fighting men and the patriotic women, putting band-aids on the bullet holes, being supplied by air in a country where roadworks were a bit of a joke. But the American Willys Jeep managed to get around in a fair few places. So anyway, a child's impressions of World War II from the books left in the holiday house. Actually, that's pretty interesting. They're American pattern jungle gators, an Australian Owen gun and a British helmet. Bit of a homage to the Golden Staircase. First place where the Japanese Imperial forces were stopped in land warfare by the Allies. And it was the Australian militia, 6-week trained alleged chocolate soldiers who did it. It was not the regular army on the Kokoda Trail. It was the Chocos. Bit of coverage, problems with local customs, with people who saw pigs differently to the way the Australians did. Just to keep the formula straight, we get an artist's impression of the occasional rare Japanese prisoner. Goldie River Crossing, Ower's Corner, Kokoda Trail. It's alright. Shorty's just behind you. He's sunk in the swamp. That's the end of his rifle sticking up. Warbles on a lot to YouTube, 2013. 25th of April, Anzac Day. Matter of principle. Imagine writing a poem about a night patrol. We're trying to do a drawing to illustrate an ambush. Somehow cartoons are easier. It's no good, Gus. They got too much of a head start. Road making. New Guinea. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. Ciao. War stories I used to read as a child.